Honolulu, the capital city of our American territory, the Hawaiian Islands, is a beautiful modern city set against a background of primitive beauty in these crossroads of the Pacific. The bright roofs, the vivid splashes of color in the flowering trees, the green mountains veiled with rainbows combine to make a cloisonne of unforgettable loveliness. Palm trees constantly sway in the soft trade winds, providing the delightful climate which the islands enjoy. The Royal Hawaiian Hotel, where serenaders delight in singing old melodies of Hawaii as they wander through its fragrant garden.
Today on Spectrum Hawaii, Cynthia Yip talks with DeSoto Brown on location on Waikiki Beach.
Aloha and thank you for joining us. 55 years after that first color and sound film was made, a myriad of images was read, heard, and seen by people who might be enticed to visit the islands. We'll look at how those early images were created. And joining me is DeSoto Brown, who is collection manager of moving images at the Bishop Museum and who has a personal interest in this early promotional memorabilia. DeSoto, thank you very much for joining us. First of all, what are moving images?
Well, Cynthia, moving images is a term which is coming increasingly into use these days to collectively describe both film and videotape. And my job at Bishop Museum is to take care of the collection of historic film and tape.
And that film clip we just saw came from your collection.
That's absolutely
And I noticed that it was particularly lyrical, the writing. Was that the style during that period?
Yes, it was. I think it's very typical of the very kind of flowery, perhaps unrealistic type of portrayal of the islands, which was very typical of that time.
Speaking of this early days of tourism, what brought the tourists here were boats. And I often hear of people reminiscing about boat days. Why were those times so important?
Boat Day was a very important day in Honolulu, and it refers to the day that a large passenger ship was coming to town or leaving town. And in both cases, it meant a lot of festivities, a lot of hustle and bustle down at the dock. It meant that mail would be coming in or going out. Important people might be arriving, or you might be seeing somebody off. And so there was a lot of activity, people selling leis, and a lot of sentiment attached too, because there was always the poignancy of someone departing and watching the ship pull away from the dock with the streamers hanging off of it. It really affected people in a way I think that airplane travel doesn't quite capture. It was a different time. I think an important thing to mention, too, was the romance of the Matson liners, because the Matson line was the main ship carrier that carried passengers between Hawaii and the West Coast. And their promotional material was very distinctive. The menus, for example, by people like Frank McIntosh and Eugene Savage, are known even today. And you can also see in Matson's promotional brochures and pamphlets how they appeal to a very upper-class type of audience.
What I noticed was a very romantic image that was portrayed through these Matson brochures and menus. You know, was that really necessary to intensify an already romantic place such as Hawaii?
Perhaps it wasn't, but it was what was done nonetheless, and it's very typical of advertising in that time period. And the Hawaiian Islands, I think, lend themselves to that treatment. So you covered things like the romantic image of Diamond Head with the moon. You covered the romance of Waikiki, the beautiful Hawaiian woman. All of these things, even if they might have been unrealistic, were what was used to sell Hawaii.
What I also noticed from these images was that of a happy Hawaiian. You know, being part Hawaiian yourself, are you at all offended by that?
No, I'm not. I don't think that it's meant to be a realistic portrayal of Hawaiian culture or Hawaiian people. It's a fantasy, and I don't think it can be taken as something which was meant to be realistic. Certainly, no one has ever lived a life of total carefree ease, and even if that was what people wanted to believe, it wasn't always the case.
Would you say that this is art that's portraying real life?
Well, I think that they are not realistic. I think that it's a romantic image, and certainly that's clear. I think that it's an interesting comparison to today when you contrast the use of art in advertising versus the use of photography, which is what we have now. Certainly a photograph never quite captures that same kind of hazy, ideal romance that art does. It's a different way of looking at things, and it's not the way we do it nowadays, which I think is why this older material really looks so different to our eyes today.
When we look at these sort of fantasy images, do you think that these images perpetuate stereotypes?
Yes, I think to a degree they do. But I think you have to understand that this material was not intended to be a strictly realistic portrayal of what life was in Hawaii. And in fact, people did cover what life was really like. Advertising, I think, usually doesn't intend to cover that. And so it's understandable that this material looks like this. It isn't supposed to be totally realistic. Nothing really should be discarded simply because it may not fit with the way we see ourselves today. It should be seen in the light of being a record of a certain time and the way people thought of things in that time period. And I think that's what this type of promotional stuff is.
And speaking of realism, let's go to film. I know that Hollywood also had a lot of these so-called Hawaii-based films. However, they weren't really. Tell us more about them.
Well, Hollywood certainly did use Hawaii as a setting for a number of films, and that's true even today. A lot of cases, though, they didn't really come out here to film. A lot of the material wasn't shot on location. They did it in studios simply because they could control a lot of the variables that you don't have when you're on location. And so a lot of things which are supposed to be set in Hawaii actually never left Hollywood, and you can tell that they're all in a studio. But still, it's kind of a fun thing to look at today, even if it isn't really true.
Did people, the visitors, get this image that this is really Hawaii, though? I'm wondering if that was also perpetuated.
I think they probably did have an overly unrealistic idea of what they were going to encounter when they got here, simply because they had been seeing Hollywood films. But again, Hollywood portrayed a lot of other locations in a very similar manner, and they weren't trying to be true about things. They were trying to just create a nice feeling, a nice mood, a nice emotion.
No, and radio was also another medium that lured visitors to Hawaii, and a show that was heard by millions of people across the nation and the world was Hawaii Calls.
The sound of these waves here on the famous beach at Waikiki means you're with us again in Hawaii. Listen. And that means welcome again to the islands of Hawaii. And from all of us here at Waikiki Beach, a big aloha. All right. I hope you heard all the voices here, because we are a big gathering of real happy people here on the terraces of the big Reef Hotel. And there are people from almost everywhere you can think of. Now, you are with us in this bright picture just in time for our Waikiki Beach Party, with beautiful Hawaiian girls and handsome men, hula dancers, gay, lively songs, and soft, romantic melodies, the music of the islands as Hawaii calls.
Oh, hey, a volley away, ekmoa e lava helene ku aloha. Oh, hey, a volley away, ekmoa e lava helene ku aloha. Oh, hey, a loa away, hoki hoki mai. A hele puina o ia nau. Hoi alawe, hoi hoi mai. A hele puina o ia nau.
Hawaii Calls was a very well-known radio show. It was heard in its 40 years of existence over more than 600 radio stations in the United States and throughout the world. And from 1935 to 1975, it spread the word about the Hawaiian Islands and Hawaiian music itself all over the world. You know, it occurred in the Moana Hotel Banyan Court, and during the broadcast, which the public was invited to come and sit in as an audience, you might see people like Duke Kahanamoku on stage, or other people might come on stage, and you always saw a lot of very famous Hawaiian entertainers.
I understand that there were approximately 19,000 broadcasts of Hawaii Calls that you said spread the word throughout the world. You know, what is it about that drew people to Hawaii?
Well, I think the allure of radio, particularly in those days, was that it depended a lot on your imagination. You weren't presented any images, so you had to make up the images in your own mind, and that's why radio dramas were so popular and so famous. So Hawaiian music conjured up all these pictures of the romantic type of thing that we've been talking about, and that's what was created into people's minds through Hawaiian music and through the descriptions of the islands that they heard over the radio.
Was Hawaii Calls a promotional vehicle also, as were some of the other images that we've been talking about?
Yes, it did serve that function, and I'm sure that it was supported for that reason, because tourism at that time was a growing industry, unlike today, which it's now our main industry in the islands. It was secondary to agriculture, but certainly was growing, and therefore it needed to be advertised. Well, in the same way that radio did this job, television has also done the same job for the Hawaiian Islands, and that's happened through things like documentaries, it's happened through variety shows, it's happened through fictional dramatic series, which are even being made even today. And after such a series goes out of its network showings, it remains in syndication, and again, people are seeing it all over the world. The HVB did sponsor, and I believe still does sponsor, Hawaiian musicians to travel around, and that's a way of spreading the word too. We're going to go into a clip from an Australian television show from 1962, and here are some Hawaii Visitors Bureau sponsored musicians appearing in a Hawaiian musical montage in a show called Review 62.
Travel everywhere, for there's no place like Hawaii. We have everything and more that you've never seen before, for there's no place like Hawaii. There's a saying, oh, but very true, when you leave, Hawaii goes with you. Oh, what beauty you will
reality, for there's no place like Hawaii.
Lovely hula hands, graceful as a bird in motion, gliding like the gulls on the ocean. Lovely hula hands, white Hawaiian sands, nothing in this tropic splendor, like the lightest touch of your splendor, lovely hula hands.
Hey, Joe, how about giving us some real traditional Hawaiian music?
Going my
What I noticed from looking at that film clip was that the evident impact of Hollywood, and particularly commercialism, sort of a wicky-wacky-woo type of image. You know, did Australians really believe that that was what Hawaii is all about?
I don't think they really believed that. It was very obviously a set. You can see that those people at that supposed luau are actually sitting on a linoleum floor. It's a suggestion of the islands. The backdrop was just painted. It wasn't supposed to be totally realistic.
What about the Kodak Hula show?
I think something interesting to keep in mind about the Kodak Hula show is that it was sponsored by Kodak but not created by them. The Royal Hawaiian Girls Glee Club, which was the troupe which performed in it in its original years, was the creator of the show. They set it up. They decided what they were going to sing and perform. So it was, in fact, a Hawaiian group that created that entire program. And the show, as a historical aside, began in 1937. It continued up until World War II put an end to it in 1941, resumed in 1949, and is still going strong today. It is a very long-lived, and it can be said to be an institution, really, in the field of Hawaiian promotion.
And what about Aloha Week? I understand that we also have beginnings back then when it started as a promotion vehicle also.
Well, Aloha Week began in 1947, and its purpose was really twofold. First of all, there was the intention of perpetuating Hawaiian handicrafts, Hawaiian styles of Hawaiian culture, really. But in addition to that, Aloha Week was created as an event which could be promoted, which took place at a slow time in the year for tourism. And back then, that was the month of October. So although Aloha Week does serve the purpose of the continuation of Hawaiian culture, it also does have an economic reason for existing as well.
What else did Aloha Week inspire and influence?
Well, Aloha Week certainly benefited tourism, but another economic impact that it had was on the garment industry locally. You see, at that time, not that many local people, or not so many, wore local Aloha wear garments. And one of the heavily promoted aspects of Aloha Week was to push the sales of locally produced muumuus and Aloha shirts. At that time, people did not wear those clothes to work, and it was a big exception during that 1 week period to wear an Aloha shirt to work. Certainly nowadays, things have changed to the point where very few men wear anything but an Aloha shirt. The tie has almost completely become extinct in the business world, and that can be traced back to the beginnings of Aloha Week more than 40 years ago.
Doing my bit to bolster tourist trade. When an income tax inspector on vacation comes out to Waikiki for relaxation, I just relax and get my taxes paid. Doing my bit to help the tourist trade. When a big shot from the east who likes to gamble possesses thoughts that are inclined to ramble, I use my heart as groundwork for my spade, doing my bit to help the tourist trade. If an old maid aunt should beg for my assistance in some stuffy cause, I'd scream resistance and say to Hades with the ladies' aid, I'm doing my bit to bolster tourist trade. Now wouldn't you know the girls are all accusing poor little me of tactics they're all using. But Daddy dear, you needn't be afraid, I'm doing my bit to bolster tourist trade, doing my bit to help the tourist trade.
Would you say that Aloha Week then has had a pretty positive influence, you mentioned, on the industry as far as Aloha wear, but and also on tourism? And what about just perpetuating the Hawaiian culture itself?
I think Aloha Week does serve a purpose in perpetuating the Hawaiian culture, and I think it's important to note that it did start with that idea in mind, and I think it has continued to successfully do that.
Looking back now on the images, and particularly of Hawaiian women, we saw recently, as you mentioned, this Aloha Week, we saw the Kodak Hula Girls, we saw the early images of them in sort of this fantasy motif. How would you say that has evolved?
Well, things have changed in advertising, certainly. Nowadays, things are not quite so romanticized. And as I mentioned earlier, that's partly due to the reliance of photography now, because we don't use artwork in promotional material or advertising. And certainly, photography is always going to give you a more realistic look. Another thing that's changed is there's less of a reliance on, shall we say, just the image of the Hawaiian woman. So nowadays, you'll tend to see in advertising pictures of groups of people, men and women, or couples. That, again, is just something which is part of a larger trend. And to look at the older material, you can really date it, because there's always the hula girl next to the palm tree with Diamond Head in the background. We don't quite get into that so much these days.
What is it that draws you to collecting all this?
I collect promotional material because I think it's beautiful. Certainly, it's not a strictly realistic portrayal of life as it was, and that's okay because art isn't supposed to be a strictly realistic portrayal of life at any time. I think that there is a lot of beauty in this artistic view of Hawaii, even if it's not true to life. And I think other people appreciate it too, even if they may find aspects of it not true.
So where are we going today? We looked at these fantasy images, we're looking at more realism, and today, where is advertising, promotion of Hawaii going?
Well, I don't think the romantic ideal is ever going to go away. I think the exotic and appealing and alluring aspects of the Hawaiian Islands are always going to be played up. The physical beauty, the interesting people, that stuff's never going to go away. Certainly the techniques have changed and they will continue to change as time passes. But the underlying beauty, the underlying things that we've seen before already, they're going to continue, I think.
Thank you very much for sharing your information with us, and of course all your memorabilia, everything that we've seen as far as these fantasy images from your personal collection.
Thank you for having me.
Aloha, and thank you for joining us from Waikiki Beach.